The clock on the mantelpiece strikes 8. For 20 years this was the hour of shared laughter, the clatter of heavy ceramic plates, and the constant bustling energy of growing children. But tonight the year is 1900, and the kitchen carries a different kind of presence. It is the presence of a profound, unbroken stillness. Have you ever wondered how a house breathes when the voices that filled it for decades suddenly vanish into the wider world? How does a mother's heart recalibrate when her hands, once occupied from dawn till dusk with the care of others, are suddenly granted the gift, or perhaps the burden, of quiet hours? Tonight we step back into the turn of the 20th century, not to witness the grand speeches of politicians or the roaring engines of the Industrial Revolution, but to sit softly in the gentle glow of a kerosene lamp, observing the quiet, beautiful transformation of a mother's daily life after the children have grown and gone. In the year 1900, family life was undergoing a subtle tectonic shift. For generations, agrarian traditions meant that families stayed tightly bound to the land, with multiple generations working the same soil and sharing the same roof. But as the new century dawned, the magnetic pull of growing cities, modern factories, and new romantic horizons began to draw young adults away from the countryside and the small towns of their birth. One by one, the bedrooms emptied, the heavy woolen blankets were folded away into cedar chests. The small boots that once tracked mud through the back door were replaced by the adult shoes of young men and women walking down distant city streets or setting up their own modest households miles away. For the mother remaining in the home, this was not a sudden tragedy, but a gradual fading of a familiar season. It was an era where her identity had been entirely anchored to the rigorous demands of motherhood. To cook, to wash, to mend, to tutor, and to comfort were not just daily tasks, they were the very fabric of her existence. When the last train pulled away from the station carrying her youngest child toward a new life, the silence that returned to the house was heavy, yet deeply reflective. It invited a slow, introspective journey into what it meant to be a maternal figure in a rapidly changing world. As we journey through this peaceful evening, let your mind drift back to those simpler, quieter times. Let the gentle cadence of history wash over you, soothing your thoughts and easing you into a deep, restful state of relaxation. We will explore the delicate letters penned by candlelight, the reorganization of domestic spaces, and the quiet resilience of women who found new purpose in the autumn of their lives. The channel Sleepy History with Benedict is a storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of positive emotional values. As the first light of dawn filters through the lace curtains, it illuminates a kitchen that no longer requires the frantic energy of years past. In the year 1900, the morning routine of a mother with a full household was an intricate dance of labor. The cast-iron stove had to be stoked with wood or coal long before the rest of the family awakened. Huge iron pots of porridge had to be stirred continuously, and loaves of bread kneaded the night before needed to be baked to feed hungry, growing children. The air would be thick with the scent of wood smoke, boiling coffee, and the damp wool of coats drying near the hearth. Now, in this new season of life, the morning arrives with a gentle, unhurried grace. The mother lights the stove, but the fire needed is small, just enough to boil a single copper kettle for tea and toast. The vast silence of the kitchen is no longer jarring, it has become a familiar companion. She sits by the window, watching the mist rise from the morning meadows, holding a warm porcelain cup in hands that are, for the first time in decades, entirely her own. There is no rush to pack lunches for school or prepare heavy midday meals for field hands and children rushing through the door. Every object in the house seems to hold a memory, resting in the quiet dust motes, dancing in the morning sunbeams. Walking down the narrow hallway, she opens the door to the bedroom where her children once slept. The room feels larger now, stripped of the clutter of childhood. The trundle beds are pushed neatly against the wall, covered in clean starch-white counterpanes that she painstakingly wove herself. On the wooden washstand, the ceramic pitcher sits empty, no longer needing to be filled with fresh well water every morning. Yet this emptiness does not signify a house that is dead, rather it is a house that is resting, much like the fields during the winter solstice. The structure itself seems to breathe a sigh of relief after decades of absorbing the footsteps, the tears, the growth and the laughter of a generation. The mother looks at the empty corner where a cradle once stood, remembering the soft weight of her infants, and realizes that her relationship with this house has shifted from one of constant physical management to one of deep, spiritual stewardship. Outside, the world of 1900 is moving fast. Steam trains whistle in the distance, factories are expanding, and the old ways are slowly yielding to the modern era. But within these four walls, time slows down. The mother learns to appreciate the slow ticking of the grandfather clock in the parlour, finding comfort in its steady, predictable rhythm. It tells her that while life outside changes and children journey far into the unknown, the home remains an anchor of peace, stability, and enduring love. The afternoon brings with it a specific quality of light, a soft golden amber that slants across the polished oak writing desk in the parlour. In this era of 1900, before the widespread adoption of the telephone or the instant connectivity of modern communication, the written word was the fragile, beautiful thread that kept distant families woven together. For a mother whose children had departed, the writing desk became the new heart of her domestic universe. It was here, among the scent of dried lavender and black ink, that she bridged the miles between her quiet home and the bustling worlds her children now inhabited. Taking a steel-nibbed dip pen from its crystal holder, she opens a bottle of dark violet ink. The act of writing a letter in the early 20th century was an intentional, meditative ritual. Each stroke of the pen required patience, care, and a deliberate ordering of thoughts. She begins her letter with the familiar, comforting phrases of maternal inquiry, asking about the weather in the distant city, the cost of coal in the urban markets, and the health of her children's new neighbours. Through these letters, we catch a glimpse of the profound emotional adaptation taking place. She writes of the small happenings in the village, the blooming of the apple orchards, the health of the old family horse, and the hymns sung at the Methodist church on Sunday morning. She deliberately keeps her tone cheerful, withholding the minor aches of her aging body, or the occasional pang of loneliness that strikes when the evening wind howls through the eaves. Her letters are designed not to burden her children with guilt, but to provide them with an unchanging sanctuary of words, a reminder that no matter how far they wander into the fast-paced new century, her love remains an unshakable foundation. The arrival of the postman was the focal point of her week. The distant sound of horse hooves beating against the dirt road or the crisp rattle of the mail cart would bring her to the front porch with a quickened heartbeat. To receive a letter from a son working in a Chicago rail yard or a daughter teaching school in a growing Midwestern town was to receive a precious gift of life. She would carry the envelope inside, refusing to rush, savouring the anticipation. Sitting in her favourite rocking chair, she would carefully slice open the paper with a silver letter opener, reading the words slowly, absorbing the handwriting and imagining the exact tone of her child's voice. These letters were read and reread until the creases in the paper grew soft and velvety from the friction of her fingers. They were then tied neatly with a piece of silk ribbon and stored inside a heavy wooden keepsake box. Each letter was a tangible proof that though her children had outgrown her physical care, they had not outgrown their need for her presence in their lives. The domestic rhythm had transformed from physical labour into an intellectual and emotional stewardship, a quiet ministry of remembrance and steady encouragement sent across the miles. With the shrinking of daily chores, the mother in 1900 found herself facing an unfamiliar luxury, the gift of unallocated time. In the earlier chapters of her life, time was an unyielding master, measured by the urgent cries of infants, the necessity of processing harvest crops, and the relentless cycle of washing clothes by hand in heavy tubs of boiling water. To sit idle for even an hour was an unthinkable indulgence. But now, as the household grew smaller, the hours expanded like the long shadows of a summer evening, inviting her to reclaim her own rhythm. She turned her attention to tasks that were once rushed or postponed. In the quiet parlour, a large wooden quilting frame was set up near the south-facing window. Quilting had always been a necessity for keeping a 19th-century family warm, but now it became an avenue of artistic expression and quiet contemplation. Instead of quickly patching worn-out work trousers, she spent hours meticulously arranging scraps of coloured calico, silk and velvet into intricate patterns like the log cabin or the Star of Bethlehem. Each piece of fabric she stitched into the quilt was a fragment of family history, a scrap from a daughter's first school dress, a piece of a husband's holiday waistcoat, or a remnant of a Sunday apron. As her needle moved smoothly through the layers of cotton batting, she was not just creating a blanket, she was weaving the memories of her family into a beautiful, enduring tapestry. The domestic garden also underwent a gentle transformation. In previous years, the plot of land behind the house was strictly utilitarian, crowded with rows of heavy cabbages, potatoes, turnips and onions to feed many mouths through the frost of winter. While a smaller vegetable patch remained, the mother now dedicated the borders of the garden to flowers that pleased the eye and calmed the soul. She planted sweet peas that climbed up wooden trellises, rows of fragrant English lavender, and deep red heritage roses that filled the afternoon air with a rich, nostalgic perfume. Tending to these delicate plants allowed her maternal instincts to find a new outlet. She watered, pruned and nurtured the soil, finding immense peace in watching life bloom quietly under her care, free from the chaotic demands of a bustling household. As the afternoon light faded into a soft twilight, she would gather a small bouquet of fresh lavender and bring it inside, placing it on the dining table that now sat only two. The house felt warm, safe, and deeply peaceful. The silence was no longer something to be feared or filled with noise. It had become a sacred space where the soul could rest, reflect, and appreciate the beautiful legacy of a job well done. All stories on this channel, Sleepy History with Benedict, are fictional, thoughtfully crafted around historical themes and inspired by real events, figures and periods, reimagined for engaging storytelling. The content does not represent real individuals, actual events or documented cases. Any resemblance to real people, animals or events is purely coincidental. As the sun slips fully below the horizon, the deep blue of the evening sky blankets the countryside inside the house. The mother walks through the rooms, carrying a long match to light the kerosene lamps. One by one, the glass globes catch the flame, casting a soft amber glow that softens the edges of the heavy wooden furniture. In the year 1900, the evening was a time of true cessation from labour. Without the bright, artificial glare of modern electricity, the fading of the light was a natural signal for the mind and body to slow down, to withdraw from the worries of the world, and to embrace the quiet sanctuary of the home. In this smaller household, the dinner hour is a gentle affair. The dining table, which once required extra leaves to accommodate a crowded family, has been restored to its original modest size. The meal is simple but prepared with a quiet mindfulness, perhaps a warm bowl of vegetable stew, fresh butter and a loaf of crusty bread. For the mother and her husband, this era brought about a profound rediscovery of one another. For decades, their conversations had been dominated by the immediate needs of their children, discussions about school books, new shoes, farm chores and childhood illnesses. Now, sitting across from each other in the warm lamplight, they find the space to speak of deeper, quieter things, or simply to share a comfortable, unspoken understanding that requires no words at all. After the dishes are washed and dried with a soft linen towel, they move into the cosy parlour. The room is filled with the comforting, rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock, a sound that feels like the steady heartbeat of the house itself. The husband opens a leather-bound book to read aloud by the lamp, his deep, resonant voice filling the space with a soothing cadence. The mother sits in her favourite rocking chair, her hands moving instinctively as she knits a pair of soft wool socks, perhaps to be sent in the next care package to a grandchild she has yet to meet. There is a profound sense of completeness in this room. The chaotic, exhausting years of early parenthood have passed, leaving behind a rich soil of memories and a deep, enduring peace that only comes after a long harvest. If you are finding comfort in this quiet journey back to the year 1900, and if the peaceful rhythms of this mother's life are helping you relax tonight, please take a gentle moment to support this channel. You can subscribe to Sleepy History with Benedict, leave a warm like, or share your peaceful thoughts in the comments below. Your kind presence here helps us continue to craft these soothing historical sanctuaries for your mind. The rocking chair sways gently against the floorboards, creating a soft, hypnotic melody that seems to harmonize with the wind whispering through the trees outside. The world is changing rapidly on the outside, but inside this room, wrapped in the protective warmth of the lamplight, the evening remains an unhurried, beautiful testament to a life lived with devotion, patience, and love. The transition into a smaller household did not mean the mother of 1900 isolated herself from the world. Rather, it opened a door to a wider, deeply interconnected community life. In the heavy years of raising young children, her social circle was often limited by the distance she could walk with a toddler or the demanding schedules of nursing infants. Her interactions were fleeting, a brief word exchanged over the garden fence or a quick greeting outside the church doors. But now, with her time once again belonging to herself, she found a renewed sense of purpose in the social fabric of her village. On a crisp Wednesday afternoon, she dresses in her finest high-collared woolen dress, pins a modest brooch to her lapel, and walks down the dirt lane toward the local church hall. Today is the weekly meeting of the Ladies' Benevolent Society. This was not a modern administrative committee, but a gathering of women who shared similar life chapters, coming together to support one another and those less fortunate in the community. As she enters the room, she is greeted by the familiar, comforting hum of soft female voices, the clink of porcelain teacups, and the gentle rustle of fabric. Around a large cedar table, these women would sit for hours, working collectively on charity projects. Some would knit thick mittens and scarves for the local orphans, while others prepared food baskets for elderly neighbours who could no longer tend their own gardens. For our mother, this circle of women was an invaluable sanctuary here, surrounded by lifelong friends who had also seen their own children grow and fly from the nest. She found a shared understanding that did not need to be articulated. They shared stories of their children's successes in the cities, exchanged cooking recipes, adapted for smaller households, and offered gentle comfort to those experiencing the fresh sting of an empty home. This community engagement extended beyond formal meetings. The mother became a frequent visitor to younger families in the neighbourhood. When a new baby was born down the lane, she was among the first to arrive, carrying a warm pot of chicken broth and a wealth of maternal wisdom gained over decades of practical experience. She would cradle the newborn with practiced, confident hands, allowing the exhausted young mother to find a few hours of uninterrupted sleep. In doing so, her role transformed from being a mother to her own children into becoming a revered matriarch of the community, an anchor of stability and wisdom for the next generation. As she walks home in the cooling twilight, the air crisp with the scent of autumn leaves, she feels a deep sense of belonging. The house she returns to may be quiet, but her life is full. She realizes that the love she cultivated within her family has naturally spilled over the boundaries of her own property, enriching the lives of everyone around her and weaving her tightly into the enduring, beautiful fabric of her community. As the golden days of autumn slowly give way to the crisp silver frost of early winter, the natural world outside the window undergoes its own predictable transition. In the year 1900, the changing of the seasons dictated the absolute rhythm of human life. For a mother in a quiet home, the approach of winter was no longer a period of frantic anxiety. In earlier years, the first frost brought a mountain of urgent preparations, ensuring there were enough heavy wool socks knitted for half a dozen children, checking that the cellar was overflowing with hundreds of jars of preserved fruits, and constantly managing the mountain of firewood needed to keep a drafty, crowded house warm. Now the winter preparation is an unhurried, almost poetic routine. The cellar still holds its treasures, but the rows of glass jars are neatly arranged and modest in number. There are jars of deep red spiced plums, golden pears preserved in sweet syrup, and crock-pots of salted butter, all prepared with a level of care that only undivided attention can provide. The woodpile outside the kitchen door is stacked high and neat, but the consumption of fuel is small. A single fire in the parlour fireplace is enough to keep the entire compact living space thoroughly warm and comfortable. On days when the snow falls in thick, silent flakes, blanketing the country roads and isolating the house from the rest of the village, the mother finds a deep sense of contentment in her solitude. The world outside becomes a monochrome painting of white and grey, but inside, the room is alive with the warm, crackling orange glow of the hearth. She spends her mornings tending to her indoor plants, wiping the green leaves of her geraniums that sit on the windowsill, coaxing them to bloom even in the depths of winter. The silence of a snowy day becomes a canvas for beautiful memories. As she watches the smoke rise from the chimney, she recalls the winters of the past, when the house was filled with the damp smell of drying mittens, the loud chattering of children building snowmen in the yard, and the constant opening and closing of the heavy oak door. Those days were beautiful, filled with the vibrant colour of young life, but this present winter, with its stillness and absence of chaos, carries its own unique majesty. It is a season of rest, a time for the spirit to gather strength, and a gentle reminder that every stage of life has its own distinct quiet beauty. Sitting close to the fire, she pulls a soft wool shawl around her shoulders. She does not feel abandoned by time, rather she feels protected by it. The modern century may be rushing forward with its iron tracks and smoky factories, but here, in the heart of this warm room, the ancient comforting laws of winter and home remain completely unchanged, wrapped in an eternal, soothing peace. With the house remaining in its gentle state of repose, the mother of 1900 began to rediscover a part of herself that had long been buried under the beautiful weight of parental duty. In the busiest decades of her youth, her own mind was often the last kingdom she had time to cultivate. If she opened a book, it was usually to read a simple bedtime story to a sleepy child, or to check a passage in a housekeeping manual about how to remove stubborn stains from linen. Her own intellectual curiosities had been paused, held in a patient stasis while she built the foundations of her children's futures. Now, the quiet afternoons offered an open invitation to return to her own inner world. On the lower shelf of the walnut bookcase sat volumes of poetry and classic literature that had remained untouched for years. She would select a book, perhaps the lyrical verses of Wordsworth or a novel by Jane Austen, and bring it to her seat by the window. As she read, the beautiful cadence of the language would wash over her, transporting her mind to distant landscapes and philosophy. She no longer read with a divided mind, listening for a child's cry or the boiling over of a pot. She could lose herself entirely in the narrative, savouring the sentences and reflecting on their meaning with a mature, life-tested perspective. This period of quiet life also brought a deeper connection to the subtle beauty of nature. From her vantage point in the parlour, she began to notice things that a busy mother would easily overlook. She observed the precise day the bluebirds returned to build their nests in the old apple tree, the intricate geometry of the frost patterns forming on the window pane, and the way the late afternoon light shifted from a pale yellow to a deep, majestic violet just before twilight. These observations were not empty distractions, they were a form of quiet meditation, a ways of aligning her personal spirit with the grand, peaceful rhythms of the earth. If this peaceful exploration of a mother's inner life is bringing a sense of calm to your evening, please take a soft moment to gently interact with our sanctuary by subscribing to Sleepy History with Benedict, clicking the like button, or leaving a quiet comment about what brings you peace. You help ensure that these comforting stories of the past continue to reach weary minds seeking rest. As the shadows lengthen across the page of her book, she closes it gently, keeping her finger between the leaves to mark her place. She looks out at the quiet road winding through the valley, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for this unexpected chapter. Her children had not just left her with an empty house, they had left her with the space to become herself once again, wrapped in a serene, independent dignity that belonged entirely to her. The turning of the calendar toward the end of the year brought with it the preparation for the winter holidays. In the year 1900, these celebrations were deeply rooted in handcrafted simplicity and domestic warmth. For a mother whose children were now establishing their own lives in far-off towns, the holiday preparations began weeks in advance, centered around a large wicker basket placed in the corner of the dining room. This basket was to be filled with care packages, physical tokens of her enduring warmth destined for the mail coach. The kitchen once again becomes a place of dedicated creation, but the pace is entirely altered. There is no frantic rush, no clutter of loud voices begging for a taste of the festive treats. Instead, with a quiet and methodical precision, she prepares traditional recipes that are built to withstand the journey through the winter mail. She bakes dark, rich fruitcakes packed with dried currants and citrus peels, wrapping them carefully in linen cloths soaked in sweet brandy. The house fills with the intoxicating, nostalgic aroma of ground cinnamon, nutmeg, and roasted cloves, a scent that instantly summons the ghosts of holidays past, when the rooms were filled with the chaotic joy of small children waiting for morning. Alongside the baked goods, she packs the items she has spent the quiet autumn months creating. There are the thick, neatly folded wool quilts, the hand-knit socks in various sizes, and small jars of blackberry jam harvested from the summer bushes. For her daughters, she wraps delicate lace collars she crocheted by candlelight. For her sons, small leather-bound journals where they can record their thoughts in the bustling cities. Each item is placed into the wicker basket with a silent blessing, smoothed down by her worn hands with a tenderness that travel across any distance. When the packages are finally sealed with dark red sealing wax and stamped with her initials, she walks them to the village post office herself. The air is crisp, biting her cheeks, and the snow crunches satisfyingly under her boots. Walking back to her quiet home, she does not feel a sense of loss that her children will not be sitting around her dinner table this year. Instead, she feels an expansive, mature joy. She understands that the true meaning of motherhood is not about keeping her children tethered to her side, but about sending her love outward into the world, allowing it to become a protective cloak that wraps around them, no matter how many miles of snow-covered tracks separate their lives. Returning to the parlour, she lights a single candle and places it in the window facing the road. It is an old tradition, a symbol of welcome and safety for any weary traveller. The house is silent, yet it feels profoundly full, crowded with the invisible presence of love given, duties fulfilled, and an unwavering hope for the futures her children are building in the dawn of a new century. As the year 1900 progressed, the physical world surrounding the quiet home began to display the subtle, fascinating markers of a new technological age. The Industrial Revolution was no longer just a distant rumour found in the pages of city newspapers. Its inventions were gently knocking on the doors of rural and small-town households. For a mother living in a smaller, quieter house, these modern conveniences did not bring chaos. Instead, they offered an unexpected ease, transforming old, laborious chores into tasks that required only a fraction of her physical strength. In the corner of the parlour, next to the traditional spinning wheel that had belonged to her grandmother, now sat a beautifully polished sewing machine with a heavy cast-iron treadle. What used to take days of meticulous hand-stitching could now be accomplished in a single satisfying afternoon. The rhythmic, low humming sound of the needle moving swiftly through cotton fabric became a modern lullaby within the quiet rooms. The mother embraced this machine not with fear, but with a quiet gratitude. It gave her the power to mend and create with unparalleled efficiency, leaving her body less fatigued at the end of the day and preserving her eyesight for the soft hours of evening reading. Even the lighting of the house was on the verge of an incredible evolution. While the kerosene lamps still provided their familiar amber glow, rumours of electrical wires being strung along the main street of the village brought a sense of quiet anticipation. The world was finding ways to push back the dark, to make the domestic sphere safer and more manageable. For the mother, these innovations represented a profound shifting of human energy. The heavy, bone-weary exhaustion that had defined her own mother's life was being replaced by a clean, streamlined efficiency. It was as if the new century was deliberately conspiring to give women more time to think, to rest, and to simply exist within the sanctuary of their own minds. If you are enjoying this gentle journey into the changing world of 1900, and if the peaceful atmosphere of this quiet home is guiding you toward a deep and restful sleep, please take a moment to support our storytelling. Kindly subscribe to Sleepy History with Benedict, give this video a gentle like, and feel free to leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Your wonderful support keeps this peaceful space alive for everyone seeking a calm refuge at the end of the day. One evening her husband brings home a small, marvellous contraption, a phonograph with a dark morning glory horn and a handful of wax cylinders. They place it carefully on the side table, and as the needle touches the grooved surface, the quiet room is suddenly filled with the faint, scratchy, yet incredibly beautiful sound of a distant orchestra playing an old familiar waltz. Sitting together in the warm light, watching the cylinder spin, the mother smiles. The world is changing, expanding, and moving forward, but the core of the home remains a beautiful place of shared comfort, peaceful adaptation, and enduring peace. There are days when the quiet of the house invites a deeper, more structural kind of remembering. On a rainy spring morning, when the drops beat a rhythmic, hypnotic tattoo against the roof, the mother decides to ascend the narrow wooden stairs into the attic. In the year 1900, the attic was not merely a storage space, it was a physical archive of a family's history, holding the artifacts of decades spent building a life from the ground up. Here, beneath the exposed cedar beams and the rich scent of old wood, sat the heavy iron-bound trunks that contained the remnants of her children's early years. Kneeling on a woven rag rug, she turns the key in the lock of the largest trunk. As the lid creaks open, the faint aroma of cedar, dried mint, and aged paper rises into the cool air. Inside lie the treasures of a time that seems both a lifetime ago and as recent as yesterday. She reaches in and lifts out a small, hand-carved wooden horse, its painted spots faded and its leather ears softened by the eager hands of her eldest son. Beneath it are the old linen schoolbooks, their corners dog-eared and their margins filled with childish doodles of locomotives and farm animals. Each object she touches releases a flood of vivid imagery. Holding a tiny knitted baby bonnet in the palm of her hand, she can almost feel the soft, rhythmic breathing of her daughter against her chest. She remembers the sleepless nights, the anxious prayers during feverish illnesses, and the boundless, echoing laughter that once bounced off the rafters of this very house. These memories do not bring a sharp, agonizing grief. Instead, they bring a profound sense of accomplishment. The physical items are still here, preserved in the dark, but the life they represented has successfully migrated outward into the world, transforming into the independent strength of grown men and women. She carefully repacks the trunk, folding the old clothes with the same meticulous care she used when her children were small. She realizes that her role as a mother has not ended. It has simply evolved into a quiet guardianship of the family story. She is the keeper of the foundation, the person who remembers the beginning so that her children can confidently build the future. This sense of lineage and purpose gives her a deep internal fortitude that settles over her like a warm cloak. This content is inspired by and adapted from public domain works available through Project Gutenberg. The material has been transformed through original narration, editing, and storytelling to create a unique experience for educational and entertainment purposes. The heavy winter snows eventually melt into the earth, feeding the deep roots of the ancient oaks and awakening the sleeping countryside. By the time April arrives, the air is thick with the sweet, muddy scent of early spring and the promise of renewal. For the mother in her quiet home, this change of season marks a beautiful milestone. The landscape outside her window is bursting with vibrant green shoots, and the robins have returned to fill the morning air with their cheerful, melodic songs. Life, in its infinite wisdom, is moving forward once again. One sunny afternoon, as she stands on the front porch, shaking out a handmade woven rug, she spies the mail carrier coming down the lane at a faster pace than usual. He stops at her wooden gate, a wide smile on his face, and holds up a telegram, a rare and momentous form of communication reserved for the most significant events of life. Her hands tremble slightly as she accepts the crisp slip of paper, her heart beating with a mixture of anticipation and quiet excitement. She walks inside into the sunlit kitchen, sits at the wooden table, and carefully reads the printed words. The message is short, yet its impact fills the entire house with an immediate radiant warmth. Her youngest daughter, now living in a growing city across the state, has given birth to a healthy baby girl. The telegram concludes with a tender invitation. "Mother, please come as soon as the spring roads allow. We need your hands, and we need your wisdom." Sitting alone in the stillness, the mother lets the tears fall softly down her cheeks, tears of pure, unadulterated joy. In an instant, the quiet house no longer feels empty, it feels like a vast reservoir of preparation. The decades she spent rocking cradles, nursing fevers, baking bread, and listening to the worries of childhood were not lost in the silence of the past. They were a sacred training ground, a wealth of practical love and deep intuition that was now being called upon to guide a brand new generation into the 20th century. She looks around the kitchen, her eyes resting on the old copper kettle, the sturdy wooden spoons, and the neat rows of preserved fruits. A beautiful, profound understanding washes over her. The cycle of the family is not a straight line that ends in loneliness. It is a magnificent turning wheel. The children who left her home are now creating homes of their own, and her role as a mother is expanding into the revered, gentle role of a grandmother. Without a moment of hesitation, she rises from the table with a renewed energy in her step. She walks to the cedar chest in the bedroom and opens the lid, lifting out the delicate, hand-knit white baby bonnet she had looked at just weeks before in the attic. She places it carefully into her small leather travelling bag, along with a few jars of her finest plum jam and her favourite book of poetry. There is packing to be done, a train ticket to be purchased, and a new life waiting to be embraced across the miles. The quiet chapter of her winter rest is gently shifting into a vibrant, hopeful spring, full of new purpose and endless love. The days following the arrival of the telegram are filled with a purposeful, joyful activity that the house has not witnessed in a long time. In the year 1900, going on a journey to a distant town was not a matter of a sudden departure, it was a ritual of careful closure and anticipation. The mother moves through her home not with the heavy, weary steps of routine chores, but with a light, rhythmic energy that seems to make the old floorboards hum with life. She is preparing her sanctuary to rest in her absence, ensuring that the peace she has cultivated here will remain undisturbed until her return. She walks from room to room, drawing down the heavy linen shades to protect the woven rugs and velvet chairs from the strong spring sun. She checks the latches on the kitchen windows, locks the heavy oak back door, and places a clean cloth over the cast-iron stove to keep off the dust. There is a beautiful, deliberate reverence in these actions. She is not running away from her quiet life. She is temporarily closing a book that she loves, knowing she will open it again when the leaves turn gold in the autumn. Her husband spent the morning arranging for their neighbour, a trusted lifelong friend down the lane, to look after the garden patch and feed the chickens while they are away. The neighbour arrives on the porch just before noon, carrying a warm loaf of fresh soda bread for their journey. As the two women stand together in the warm spring breeze, talking about the newborn child and exchanging advice on infant care, the continuity of community life becomes beautifully clear. The wisdom of the village is a shared currency, passed back and forth between mothers who have known both the fullness of a noisy household and the stillness of an empty one. By mid-afternoon, the leather travelling bags are packed and resting by the front door. The mother takes one final walk through the parlour, her eyes lingering on the rocking chair, the grandfather clock, and the writing desk where so many letters were penned by candlelight. The room feels incredibly warm and supportive. It does not feel lonely. It feels like an encouraging old friend sending her forward with its silent blessing. She adjusts her travelling bonnet, pins her woolen shawl with a silver brooch, and steps out onto the porch, turning the key in the heavy front door lock with a satisfying metallic click. The walk to the village train station is a celebration of the new season. The ditches along the dirt road are bursting with yellow wild daffodils, and the air smells of wet earth and blossoming cherry trees. When they arrive at the small wooden station platform, the distant rhythmic thumping of the steam locomotive can be heard vibrating through the iron rails, as the massive black train chugs to a smooth halt, releasing a great cloud of white steam into the blue spring sky. The mother takes her husband's arm and steps up into the passenger carriage. Sitting by the glass window, watching the familiar landscape of her quiet village slowly begin to slide away, she feels her heart expanding with a wonderful, unhurried anticipation for the new chapter that is about to unfold. The train moves through the countryside with a steady hypnotic click-clack along the iron tracks, a sound that quickly becomes a comforting rhythm for the travelling mother, looking out through the polished glass window of the passenger carriage. She watches the familiar rural landscape slowly transform. The rolling green pastures, the neat stone walls, and the isolated farmhouses of her youth glide past like scenes from a moving painting. The world of 1900 is beautifully captured in this transition, a bridge between the ancient, slow-paced agrarian life and the dynamic, interconnected century that is just beginning to unfold. As the locomotive pulls deeper into the territory, the small towns become more frequent, their church steeples rising high above clusters of brick buildings and bustling main streets. The mother rests her head against the cushioned leather seat, letting her mind wander into a state of quiet reflection. She thinks about how this very railroad had once seemed like a distant threat, a mechanical beast that would take her children away to lands she could not see. But today, as she travels along the same tracks, she realizes that the train is not just an instrument of separation. It is a magnificent thread that stitches her quiet world to the vibrant worlds of her grown children. Sitting beside her, her husband rests his hand gently over hers, his eyes reflecting the same deep contentment that fills her own heart. They do not talk much. The rhythmic chugging of the engine and the soft murmur of other passengers create a peaceful atmosphere that discourages unnecessary words. Instead, they share the heavy, beautiful weight of memory. They remember when their children were small enough to fit on their laps, full of questions about the world beyond the horizon. Now they are travelling as equals to meet those children, not as managers of their daily survival, but as honoured keepers of their family's historical roots. As the afternoon begins to fade into a soft lavender twilight, the air outside the train window darkens, and the first electric lights of the city outskirts appear in the distance like scattered stars. The train slows down, its heavy brakes letting out a long metallic sigh as it approaches the grand urban station. The mother looks down at her travelling bag, smoothing her skirt with her hands, feeling a wave of fresh, youthful energy flowing through her veins. The quiet house she left behind is safe, resting in the memory of the countryside, but her story is far from over. As the carriage comes to a gentle, complete stop amidst the soft clouds of steam, she stands up with a serene smile, ready to step onto the platform and into the warm, waiting arms of the next generation. The grand urban train station of 1900 is a marvel of iron arches and billowing white steam, alive with the collective energy of hundreds of travellers moving toward their destinations. Yet, as the mother steps down from the high wooden carriage step onto the solid concrete platform, the vast noise of the city seems to soften around her. She carries the calm, unbroken stillness of her countryside home within her spirit like a protective shield. She walks forward with a graceful, unhurried composure, her eyes scanning the sea of faces gathered near the iron arrival gates. Then, through the thinning mist of steam, she sees him. Her son-in-law is standing near a pillar, his face lighting up with instant recognition, waving his wool cap with a joyful eagerness. Beside him, holding a thick woolen blanket closely against her chest, is her daughter. Seeing her child standing there, no longer a young girl running through the orchard, but a mature woman with the soft, glowing countenance of a new mother, brings a profound rush of warmth to the mother's heart. The miles of travel, the long months of quiet separation, and the ticking hours of the solitary winter melt away in an instant. They meet in a long silent embrace that speaks volumes more than any spoken words could ever convey. It is an embrace that carries the smell of the country wind and the fresh energy of the city, locking the past and the future together in a single beautiful moment. The daughter gently pulls back the edge of the woolen blanket, revealing the tiny sleeping face of the newborn baby girl. The mother looks down at her granddaughter, observing the delicate pink cheeks, the miniature fingers curled into tight fists, and the gentle rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. At this exact moment, standing in the middle of a bustling 20th century train station, the mother experiences an absolute clarity of purpose. The quiet life she lived in her smaller house was not an ending. It was a beautiful, necessary period of gathering strength. She has brought the patience of the country, the wisdom of decades, and the enduring tranquility of a well-loved home to this new family. As they walk together toward the horse-drawn carriage waiting outside the station doors, the city lights beginning to sparkle against the evening sky, she knows that she is exactly where she belongs, woven deeply into the continuous, beautiful, and ever-unfolding tapestry of life. The urban home of her daughter is a modern brick house, filled with the fresh, crisp scents of new polished wood and the unmistakable sweet atmosphere that accompanies a newborn child. Although the street outside carries the distant, rhythmic clopping of horse-drawn carriages and the faint evening whispers of the city, inside these walls a familiar domestic sanctuary has been established. For the mother, stepping into this kitchen feels like entering a space where her past and her children's future seamlessly dissolve into one another. On her first morning there, she wakes up before the rest of the household, guided by an internal clock that decades of motherhood have perfected. She quietly enters the nursery where her daughter sits in a low rocking chair, looking exhausted but deeply content, trying to soothe the restless infant. Without a word, the mother steps forward, her movements smooth and filled with an ancient, instinctual confidence. She gently lifts the small bundle into her own arms, supporting the tiny head with a practiced hand that has cradled generations before. She begins to sway, a slow, hypnotic movement that matches the steady ticking of the mantel clock. She hums a low, wordless melody, the very same lullaby she sang to her own children in the farmhouse bedroom when the century was young. Within minutes, the newborn's irregular breathing softens, settling into a deep, peaceful sleep. The daughter watches this transformation with tears of relief in her eyes, recognizing the immense power of maternal lineage and the quiet authority of lived experience. In the afternoon, the kitchen becomes a classroom of silent transmission. The mother does not lecture or direct. Instead, she shows by doing. She demonstrates how to bathe the fragile infant using a basin of warm water and a soft flannel cloth, how to prepare a soothing chamomile wash for a heat rash, and how to launder the delicate cotton swaddling clothes so they remain soft against the baby's skin. This is the unwritten history of women, a sacred knowledge passed down through touch, gesture, and shared silence, completely independent of the rapid industrial changes happening outside the front door. As evening approaches, the mother sits by the nursery window, looking down at the sleeping child in the wooden crib. She realizes that her presence here is a vital bridge. She has brought the slow, unhurried peace of the countryside into this fast-moving city household. Her life has not grown smaller after her children left. It has expanded outward, acting as a steady anchor for this new family as they navigate the dawn of a new era. The room darkens gently, wrapped in a profound, beautiful tranquility that blankets the past, the present, and the generations yet to come. The city evening settles down into a soft velvet indigo, and the gas lamps along the avenue are lit, casting long geometric shadows through the nursery window. Inside the house has grown quiet once more, entering that sacred state of nighttime rest that only a home with a newborn truly understands. The mother sits quietly in a comfortable armchair in the corner of the parlour, watching her daughter and son-in-law lean over the cradle together, their whispers filled with an anxious, beautiful devotion. In this quiet observation, the mother reflects on the grand journey of her own heart. She remembers the intense weight of the silence she had experienced in her own farmhouse just months ago when the last child had left. She recalls how that emptiness had initially felt like a pause, a cessation of her life's primary purpose. But now, seeing her daughter look up at her with eyes that silently ask for reassurance, the mother understands the true geometry of a woman's life at the turn of the century. The quiet years in the old house were not empty years at all. They were a period of deep spiritual accumulation. The long afternoons spent quilting, the slow hours of reading poetry by the window, and the patient waiting for the postman had distilled her maternal energy into something pure, steady, and unshakable. She had not lost her identity when her children walked out the door. She had merely stored it, allowing it to mature into a profound wisdom that could now be given away to help this new family survive the chaotic demands of a modern world. The husband gently closes his book, and the daughter comes over to rest her head for a brief moment against her mother's dependable shoulder. No words are exchanged, for none are needed. The air in the room is thick with a generational peace, an unspoken pact between the past and the future. The 20th century might continue to build its towering skyscrapers and lay down its iron tracks, but the core sanctuary of human life remains fully unchanged. It is preserved in the gentle swaying of a rocking chair, the steady warmth of a shared room, and the watchful eye of a mother who has learned that love never truly leaves. It simply changes form, waiting patiently to bloom anew. As the weeks slide past with a gentle, unhurried cadence, the newborn baby begins to grow stronger, her tiny cries turning into soft cooing sounds that fill the urban house with a fresh sense of delight. The mother observes her daughter navigating her daily duties with an increasing confidence, her movements becoming smoother, and her maternal intuition sharpening day by day. The time is approaching for the mother to consider her return journey to the quiet farmhouse in the countryside, but the thought no longer carries even a whisper of hesitation or melancholy. Sitting by the window on a warm spring afternoon, watching a gentle rain wash the brick streets of the city, she achieves a beautiful clarity of mind. She understands now that the concept of home is not a static point bound inside four wooden walls. It is an expansive living entity that grows and replicates across the miles. The quiet house she left behind in the village is not an empty shell. It is the roots of a majestic tree whose branches are now stretching out into this new town, bearing fresh fruit in the dawn of the 20th century. When she goes back to her own parlour, she knows the silence waiting for her will feel entirely different. It will no longer feel like the absence of her children's childhoods, but rather like a vast peaceful sanctuary where she can rest, think, and hold all of them in her prayers. She will look at the empty trundle beds not with a heavy heart, but with a deep, triumphant pride, knowing that the independent lives her children are building are the direct result of the stable, loving foundation she spent decades constructing. The evening sun breaks through the rain clouds, casting a magnificent golden light across the nursery floorboards. The mother stands up and walks over to the cradle, looking down at the sleeping infant, who represents the beautiful continuation of her own lineage. Outside, the world of 1900 continues its rapid, unstoppable march toward modern progress, but within this quiet room, wrapped in the protective embrace of generational love, time seems to stand perfectly still, offering a profound, unbroken peace that gently prepares the soul for whatever new journeys lie ahead. On this final evening before her scheduled departure back to the countryside, the city outside enters a rare, profound state of quietude. The heavy iron wheels of the streetcars have ceased their day-long rumbling, and the gas lamps on the avenue flicker with a steady, hypnotic blue light through the window pane. Inside the house, the mother sits alone by a small writing table in the guest room, illuminated only by the soft, warm circle of a single wax candle. She opens a small canvas-bound diary, a new journal she bought at the station, and dips her steel pen into the dark ink pot. Writing down her thoughts at the turn of the 20th century is no longer a chore or a luxury. It has become a necessary punctuation mark for her soul. Her handwriting, elegant and precise, moves slowly across the creamy paper. She writes of the soft weight of her granddaughter in her arms, the proud look in her son-in-law's eyes when he returns from work, and the incredible resilience she witnessed in her own daughter as she stepped into the demanding role of motherhood. She records these details not for history books, but to freeze this fleeting moment of generational transition into an enduring testament of family love. As she lets the ink dry under the candlelight, she looks out into the urban night sky, realizing that her understanding of loneliness has been entirely rewritten. The quietness that awaits her in her own rural farmhouse is no longer an adversary to be feared or an emptiness to be filled with busy work. It is a sacred, hard-earned peace, a quiet kingdom where she can sit as a queen, observing the fruits of her lifelong labour blooming across the distance. Her hands, though marked by the soft wrinkles of time and decades of manual toil, feel incredibly light, empty of immediate burdens, yet infinitely full of love and satisfaction. The bedroom door opens with a soft creak, and her daughter steps inside, wrapped in a warm woolen shawl. She sits on the edge of the bed, watching her mother close the diary. For a long time neither woman speaks. The silence between them is not awkward or strained. It is the rich, deep silence of two souls who share the exact same understanding of life's invisible, beautiful patterns. The daughter reaches out, taking her mother's hand and pressing it against her cheek. A silent gesture of gratitude that requires no translation. Outside, the night deepens, wrapping the house, the city, and the distant countryside in a vast protective blanket of absolute tranquility. The morning of departure arrives with a gentle, pale gold sky that promises a beautiful, clear spring day. The city is just beginning to wake up. The distant whistle of a factory steam pipe and the crisp rattle of the milk delivery cart offer a soft backdrop to the quiet movements inside the brick house. In the sunlit kitchen, the mother stands next to her packed leather travelling bag, holding a small wooden box wrapped in a piece of soft velvet ribbon. This box contains her ultimate gift for her daughter, a collection of her own mother's handwritten recipes, domestic remedies and family notes accumulated over half a century. As her daughter enters the kitchen carrying the sleeping infant, the mother gently places the wooden box into her hands. There is an unspoken understanding between them as the daughter receives this treasure. This box is not just a collection of practical household instructions. It is a physical lineage of love, resilience and maternal survival designed to guide this new urban family through the unfolding challenges of the 20th century. The daughter presses the box against her chest, her eyes glistening with a quiet, deep gratitude that transcends any need for verbal expression. The husband arrives down the stairs, ready to carry the bags to the waiting carriage outside. The final moments inside the house are marked by a serene, comfortable peace. The mother leans over to press a soft, lingering kiss against the forehead of her sleeping granddaughter, breathing in the sweet, delicate scent of infancy one last time. She feels no sadness or hesitation about leaving this beautiful scene. Her heart is completely at rest, satisfied with the knowledge that she has fulfilled her purpose here, anchoring this new household in the timeless traditions of care, patience and devotion. Stepping out onto the porch, the fresh morning air hits her face, crisp and invigorating with the scent of wet cobblestones and distant spring blossoms, as they ride toward the Grand Iron train station. The city streets are bathed in a magnificent, life-affirming light. The modern world of 1900 is moving fast, building its monuments and changing its structures, but within the mother's soul, an eternal, unchanging sanctuary remains completely intact. She looks toward the eastern horizon where the tracks lead back to her quiet country village, her spirit expanding with a beautiful, unhurried anticipation for the peaceful hours of reflection that await her in her own beloved home. The return journey on the steam train carries an entirely different emotional rhythm for the travelling mother. If the trip toward the city was marked by a fluttering, youthful anticipation of a new life beginning, the voyage back to the country is defined by a deep, resonant stillness. The rhythmic click-clack of the iron wheels against the tracks no longer sounds like a countdown to an event, but rather like a slow, grand lullaby celebrating a mission beautifully accomplished. She sits by the window, her hands resting loosely in her lap, completely surrendered to the soothing movement of the carriage. As the afternoon advances, the towering brick buildings and interconnected telegraph wires of the city gradually thin out, yielding once more to the majestic expanse of the open countryside. The landscape of 1900 opens up like a vast green canvas under the cooling spring sky. Wide fields newly turned by the plough, ancient stone fences covered in wild moss, and quiet winding streams glide past the window in a slow, hypnotic procession. The mother watches this transition with a peaceful smile, feeling as though she is shedding the busy skin of the modern world with every mile that separates her from the urban centre. The setting sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in breathtaking strokes of burnt orange, dusty rose, and deep amethyst. The golden hour light floods into the passenger carriage, bathing the wooden seats and the faces of the tired travellers in a warm, ethereal glow. In this soft light, the mother feels a profound sense of integration. She realizes that her life is not divided into fragmented pieces. The busy past of raising children and the quiet present of the empty house are actually two notes in the same beautiful, continuous melody. One could not exist without the other, and both are equally sacred. She closes her eyes for a long moment, letting the warmth of the sunbeam on her cheek and the steady hum of the locomotive soothe her mind into a state of deep, restorative relaxation. The world outside is moving forward into a new century, filled with rapid inventions and changing social tides, but here in her seat she has found the timeless centre of her own existence. She is a woman who has given her love entirely to the world, and now the world is gently carrying her back to her own quiet kingdom, where the silence is no longer an empty void, but a rich, beautiful space waiting to welcome her home. The night has fully arrived by the time the horse-drawn carriage pulls up to the wooden gate of the country farmhouse. In the clear air of the year 1900, the rural sky is a magnificent dome of deep velvet, studded with thousands of bright, silver stars that seem to watch over the landscape with a silent, eternal vigilance. As the mother steps down onto the grass, she takes a long, deep breath of the night air. It smells of damp earth, sweet wild clover, and the comforting rustic trace of wood smoke from the neighbouring chimneys. She is home. Walking up the stone path, she unlocks the heavy oak front door and steps inside into the darkened hallway. The house has been resting in her absence, preserving the exact temperature and stillness she had left behind weeks ago. As she lights the first kerosene lamp on the hallway table, its warm amber flame banishes the shadows, casting a soft, nostalgic glow over the polished wainscoting and the familiar framed family photographs hanging on the wall. The space does not feel cold or empty. Instead, it feels like an old friend that has been patiently waiting for her return, holding its breath until she walked back through the door. She moves through the rooms with a light, appreciative touch. She runs her hand along the back of the velvet parlour sofa, checks the grandfather clock, which has slowed down to a gentle stop, and stands for a moment in the doorway of the quiet kitchen. The emptiness that had once brought a sharp, confusing ache to her heart now feels like a profound gift. It is a clean, sacred space that she has earned through decades of dedicated love and hard work. The house is no longer a place of chaotic demands, but a temple of memories and a fortress of modern independence where she is completely free to exist, to think, and to dream. She winds the grandfather clock, and its deep, comforting tick-tock immediately fills the house with a familiar, mechanical pulse. Sitting down in her favourite rocking chair by the window, looking out at the starlit orchard, she feels an immense wave of gratitude wash over her entire being. Her children are safe, building their own modern destinies in the dawn of a new century, and she has successfully passed down the sacred flame of motherhood to the next generation. Wrapping her woolen shawl tightly around her shoulders, she closes her eyes, letting the absolute unbroken peace of the country night envelop her soul, drawing her into a state of deep, restorative, and beautiful rest. The bedroom upstairs welcomes her with the familiar, comforting scent of lavender-scented linen and aged cedarwood. In the quiet hours of midnight, the world of 1900 seems to fade entirely into the background, leaving only the pure, unaltered essence of a peaceful country night. The mother undresses slowly, hanging her travelling clothes with a deliberate, unhurried care, and slips into her soft cotton nightgown. As she climbs into the high, feather-stuffed bed that has supported her through decades of life's changing seasons, she feels a deep, physical surrender to the comfort of her own space. Outside the open window, a gentle spring breeze rustles through the leaves of the ancient oak trees in the orchard, creating a soft, continuous shushing sound that mimics the distant murmur of the sea. It is a natural lullaby, one that she has listened to for 40 years, a sound that has witnessed her nights of youthful worry, her years of maternal vigilance, and now her entry into a time of absolute serenity. The moonlight pours through the sheer lace curtains, casting intricate silver patterns across the wooden floorboards, painting the room in a light that feels both holy and deeply familiar. With her head resting on the plump-down pillow, she pulls the heavy handmade patchwork quilt up to her chin. Every square of fabric in that quilt is a piece of her family's history, a scrap from her daughter's first summer dress, a piece of her son's flannel school shirt, a remnant of her own wedding apron. Lying beneath this weight, she does not feel the burden of the past. Instead, she feels entirely protected, wrapped in a physical manifestation of the love she has spent a lifetime weaving. Her thoughts float gently, drifting away from the concrete details of train schedules, city streets, and the rapid pace of a new century. Her breathing slows down, synchronizing with the rhythmic, distant ticking of the grandfather clock downstairs and the gentle sighing of the wind outside. There is no longer any urgency in her spirit, no lingering questions about tomorrow, and no shadows of loneliness in the corners of her mind. She has loved fully, she has given deeply, and she has returned to the source of her own quiet strength. As her eyelids grow heavy and the silver moonlight shifts softly across the room, she allows herself to sink into a deep, dreamless and profoundly restorative slumber, completely at peace with her past, her present, and the beautiful unfolding future of the world. When the mother opens her eyes the following morning, the bedroom is already filled with a soft, milky dawn light that gently pushes away the remnants of the night's deep slumber. There is no sudden start, no rush of early morning duties pressing down upon her shoulders. The house in the year 1900 wakes up today with a profound, respectful silence, as if acknowledging that its keeper has returned and earned the right to a slow, unhurried morning. She lies still for a few beautiful moments, listening to the familiar, melodic greeting of the meadowlarks outside her window, feeling completely anchored in the present. She rises and walks downstairs, her bare feet enjoying the cool, smooth touch of the polished pine floorboards. In the kitchen, the simple ritual of preparing a morning cup of tea becomes an exercise in mindfulness. She pumps fresh, cold water from the well, kindles a small, cheerful fire in the cast-iron stove, and listens to the soft, escalating simmer of the copper kettle. Every sound is a familiar note in the symphony of her home. Sitting at the wooden table with the warm ceramic mug cupped in her hands, she looks out at the morning mist rising off the garden beds, feeling a deep internal warmth that rivals the sun. This stillness no longer carries the phantom weight of what used to be. Instead, it is filled with a rich, palpable sense of completion. She realizes that the quietness of her home is not a sign of isolation, but a grand luxury, a peaceful harbor where she can process the beauty of her life without distraction. The modern world outside will continue to invent, to build, and to accelerate, but inside this kitchen, the clock moves at the exact pace of nature. She is a woman fully possessed of her own space, resting in the quiet confidence that her love has been successfully distributed into the world, leaving her with a sanctuary that is entirely her own. As the sun climbs higher, burning away the morning fog and illuminating the budding apple trees in the orchard, she takes a slow sip of her tea, her mind completely at rest. The future is unfolding just as it should, across the miles and across the generations, but her present moment is here, in the golden light of her own kitchen, wrapped in an enduring, beautiful peace that nothing can disturb. The afternoon sun hangs like a warm golden pendulum in the vast expanse of the spring sky, casting long, soft shadows across the fertile earth of the backyard garden. After the morning's quiet rest, the mother feels a gentle nesting instinct guiding her steps toward the outdoors. In the year 1900, a garden was not merely a source of sustenance. It was an extension of the home's soul, a living diary where each season wrote its own silent poetry in the language of blossoms and roots. She dresses in her sturdiest linen apron, the one with deep pockets that have carried countless seed packets over the decades, and steps out onto the porch, her old leather boots making a familiar, grounding thud against the wooden steps. The air outside is a rich, intoxicating blend of warming soil, sweet wild violet nectar, and the crisp, clean scent of the pine forest that borders the eastern edge of the property. She walks slowly down the dirt path, her eyes scanning the neat rectangular plots that her neighbour had so faithfully watered during her absence. The dark earth looks rich and inviting, broken into soft crumbles by the recent gentle spring rains. Standing at the edge of the vegetable patch, she takes a long, deliberate breath, letting her lungs fill with the absolute purity of the country air, a stark and comforting contrast to the coal-smoke-tinged atmosphere of the distant city station. Kneeling down upon a woven burlap pad, she sinks her bare hands directly into the soil. The earth is cool beneath the surface, yet it retains a faint, residual warmth from the midday sun. There is an immediate, profound comfort in this physical contact. For a mother who has spent weeks holding the delicate, fragile weight of a newborn grandchild, pressing her fingers into the heavy, ancient soil feels like reconnecting with a different kind of mother, the earth that has sustained her family through winters of scarcity and summers of abundance. She begins to work with a slow, rhythmic patience, using a small iron trowel to turn the dirt, clearing away the tiny, persistent weeds that had dared to sprout while she was away. Every movement she makes is slow, continuous, and entirely devoid of urgency. She watches a fat, copper-coloured earthworm churn its way back into the dark depths of the soil. Admiring its silent, essential labour, she listens to the hypnotic, rhythmic droning of a solitary bumblebee as it clumsily navigates the bright yellow blossoms of the nearby mustard greens. These sounds do not disrupt the silence of the countryside. Rather, they serve to deepen it, creating a rich, layered auditory blanket that coaxes the human mind into a state of absolute meditative tranquility. There is no clock out here in the garden, no train schedules to meet, no modern innovations demanding her immediate attention. Time is measured only by the slow movement of the sun and the gradual cooling of the afternoon breeze. As she works her way down the row of early peas, tying the young, tender green tendrils to their wooden stakes with small pieces of twine, her thoughts drift back to the city house. She imagines her daughter sitting by the window, perhaps rocking the baby to sleep at this very hour. A soft, beautiful smile touches the corners of her mouth. She realizes that the distance between them is an illusion born of physical miles. In reality, they are working in the exact same garden of life. Her daughter is planting the seeds of routine, love, and protection in the heart of a new child, while she, the grandmother, is here maintaining the foundational soil from which the whole family tree emerged. This realization brings a deep, structural peace to her core, a sense of rightness that settles over her spirit like the heavy, comforting weight of a winter quilt. The afternoon begins to soften into the early stages of twilight, and the golden sunlight shifts to a deep, honeyed amber. The wind changes direction, blowing gently from the west, carrying the cool, clean scent of the distant hills. The mother stops her work, sitting back on her heels and wiping her brow with the back of her wrist. Her hands are stained dark with the rich earth, a mark of beautiful alignment that she wears with pride. She looks out over her quiet kingdom, the orchard trees showing their first green leaves, the smoke rising in a thin, lazy spiral from her kitchen chimney, the absolute stillness of the rural landscape. She is completely full, completely at rest, completely home. The sun continues its slow, majestic descent behind the crest of the western hills, painting the wide canvas of the sky in deep, velvet tones of violet, indigo, and a faint, shimmering gold. As the daylight hours gently dissolve into the cool embrace of the evening, the air in the garden grows heavy with the scent of damp grass and nocturnal blossoms opening their petals to the stars. The mother remains seated on her burlap pad for a few long contemplative moments, watching the transformation of her world. The vibrant greens of the orchard trees slowly soften into dark protective silhouettes against the twilight sky, and a profound, reverent hush falls over the entire valley, as if nature itself is taking a deep collective breath before falling asleep. With a slow, deliberate grace she begins the ritual of gathering her tools. There is no haste in her movements. Each action is carried out with the mindful precision of a woman who has aligned her internal clock with the unhurried rhythms of the earth. She picks up the iron trowel, wiping the rich, dark soil from its blade with a tuft of dry grass, and places it carefully into her woven wicker basket along with the remaining bundles of twine. Her body feels a sweet, satisfying tiredness from the afternoon's labour, a healthy, grounded fatigue that promises a night of deep, undisturbed rest. She stands up, smoothing the front of her linen apron, and takes one final look at the neat rows of earth she has cultivated, feeling a deep sense of partnership with the soil beneath her feet. She walks slowly back toward the house, her leather boots making a soft, rhythmic crunching sound against the gravel path. The kitchen porch is already wrapped in cool shadows, but as she opens the wooden screen door, the interior of her home feels welcoming and secure. She sets the basket of tools down in the mudroom and steps into the kitchen, where the residual warmth from the morning's small fire still lingers in the air like a gentle embrace. In the fading light, the copper kettle on the stove and the rows of glass preserve jars on the shelves gleam with a soft, muted reflection. She does not immediately light the kerosene lamp. Instead, she allows herself to sit quietly at the wooden table, letting her eyes adjust to the gathering darkness, fully immersing herself in the peaceful transition from day to night. After a long interval of stillness, she rises to prepare a simple evening meal. In the year 1900, the evening meal for a solitary woman was not an elaborate production, but a quiet sacrament of self-care. She places a few small pieces of seasoned oak wood into the firebox of the cast-iron stove, striking a single sulphur match to awaken the sleeping embers. The tiny flame catches quickly, casting a warm, dancing amber glow across the kitchen floorboards and filling the room with the comforting, crackling sound of burning wood. She cuts a thick slice of the fresh soda bread given to her by her neighbour, spreads a generous layer of her own homemade plum jam over its golden crust, and pours a small bowl of cold milk from the earthenware crock in the pantry. Eating alone in the semi-darkness, illuminated only by the cheerful firelight from the stove, the mother feels an absolute unshakable contentment. She thinks of the grand, bustling city she left behind, with its loud electric signs, its crowded streets, and its relentless forward-marching progress. She bears no ill will toward that modern world. It is the world where her children will build their lives and where her granddaughter will grow into the new century. But she knows, with a clarity that only time and experience can provide, that the true anchor of human life does not reside in technological advancements. It resides in these quiet moments of simplicity, where the soul is fed by warmth, silence, and gratitude. Outside the kitchen window, the first stars of the night begin to appear, piercing the deep blue fabric of the sky like brilliant diamond points. The distant, lonely hoot of a horned owl echoes from the depths of the pine forest, followed by the steady, rhythmic chirping of the field crickets beneath the porch steps. These nocturnal sounds do not disrupt the silence of her home. They are the natural caretakers of the night, a reassuring chorus that confirms the world is safe and functioning exactly as it should. The mother finishes her meal, washes her plate with a slow, hypnotic movement in the basin of warm water, and stands by the window, looking out into the starlit darkness. The house around her feels incredibly vast, not with the emptiness of loneliness, but with the grand, beautiful space of a life well lived and a heart completely at peace. The night deepens over the valley, wrapping the farmhouse in a profound, velvety quiet that belongs uniquely to the countryside at the dawn of the 20th century. Inside the parlour, the mother sits in her high-backed velvet armchair, having finely lit the large glass-bellied kerosene lamp on the side table. The flame burns with a steady, warm amber glow, casting soft, flickering patterns against the floral wallpaper and creating a cosy perimeter of light that keeps the vast darkness of the room at bay. In her lap sits a small lacquered cedarwood box, a chest of family treasures that she has kept for nearly 30 years, containing the handwritten letters sent by her children from various stages of their journeys away from home. With slow, rhythmic movements she lifts the lid, allowing the faint, nostalgic scent of dried rose petals and aged paper to drift into the room. She reaches inside and selects a small bundle of letters tied together with a faded blue satin ribbon. These are the letters from her eldest son, written during his first year in the city, and the letters from her daughter before her marriage. Her fingers, weathered and calloused from years of domestic devotion and garden work, touch the brittle parchment with an exquisite, maternal tenderness. She unties the ribbon with a deliberate lack of haste, enjoying the physical sensation of the fabric slipping through her hands, treating these simple papers with the reverence of a historian handling sacred texts. She begins to read by the golden lamplight, her eyes moving slowly across the elegant sweeping ink strokes. As she reads the familiar words, she doesn't just see the ink, she hears the distinct voices of her children echoing softly in the silence of the parlour. She reads of her son's initial amazement at the tall brick buildings, her daughter's nervous excitement about setting up her own kitchen, and their constant repetitive expressions of gratitude for the steady, peaceful upbringing they received in this very house. Reading these words now, after having just visited that bustling urban world herself, the letters take on a deeper, more resonant meaning. They are no longer symbols of distance or separation. They are the invisible, unbreakable threads of a grand tapestry that connects her quiet parlour to the wider, vibrating world outside. The wind outside rises gently, making a soft, rhythmic sighing sound as it brushes past the corners of the house and rustles the heavy lace curtains at the window. The grandfather clock in the hallway maintains its slow, deep, mechanical pulse, tick-tock, tick-tock, a sound that has measured the heartbeats of this family for generations. The mother rests the letters against her chest, closing her eyes to fully absorb the rich comfort of the moment. She realizes that she is never truly alone in this house. The walls are saturated with the laughter of her children's childhoods. The floorboards remember the running steps of their youth, and the air carries the enduring energy of her lifelong love for them. The quietness of the empty house is not a vacuum, it is a full living presence, a sanctuary where she can sit and hold her entire family in her thoughts without the distractions of a busy world. She carefully folds the papers back into their original creases, retying the blue satin ribbon with a neat, satisfying knot, and places the bundle gently back into the cedarwood box. She turns the small brass key in the lock, a metallic click that sounds incredibly crisp in the silent room. Standing up, she walks to the window and looks out into the starlit night. The valley is completely dark, save for the distant twinkling lantern of a neighbour's barn a mile away. The world of 1900 is moving fast, filled with the loud hum of machinery and the bright glare of progress. But here, in the heart of her rural home, she has found an eternal, unshakable peace. She blows out the kerosene lamp, watching the red ember of the wick fade into the dark, and stands for a moment in the beautiful, protective shadow of her home, her heart completely at rest and ready for the restorative embrace of sleep. The darkness inside the farmhouse is not an empty void, but a soft, protective blanket that wraps each room in a profound, historic stillness, guided by decades of muscle memory and the gentle, silvery starlight filtering through the hallway windows. The mother walks slowly up the wooden staircase. Each step makes a faint, familiar creak beneath her feet, a comforting, low-frequency sound that has anchored her nightly routine for 30 years. Her body is now fully saturated with the sweet, heavy fatigue of the day's work and the long emotional journey of her return. With every step she takes toward her bedroom, she feels herself shedding the last remnants of conscious thought, preparing her spirit to cross the threshold into a deep, restorative oblivion. Entering her bedroom, she moves with a serene, hypnotic slowness, completely unhurried by the passage of time. She slips into her fresh linen nightgown, which carries the crisp, clean scent of the country wind and wild lavender from the drying lines. As she pulls back the layers of her heavy handmade patchwork quilt, a wave of familiar warmth rises to greet her. She climbs into the high feather bed, feeling her entire body immediately sink into the plush, cloud-like mattress. Her shoulders relax, her hands loosen their grip on the waking world, and her head rests deeply into the center of the soft down pillow, aligning her spine with the natural, peaceful gravity of her home. Just as she closes her eyes, a soft, rhythmic pattering begins against the glass pane of the bedroom window. It is the arrival of a gentle spring midnight rain, falling in slow, fat drops upon the budding apple trees in the orchard and the freshly turned earth of her garden outside. The sound is incredibly consistent, a continuous, low-decibel whisper that creates a perfect acoustic sanctuary around her bed. It drowns out the vastness of the outside world, isolating her in a warm cocoon of absolute safety. The rhythmic drumming of the rain on the shingled roof synchronizes perfectly with the slow, heavy rise and fall of her chest, lowering her heart rate and coaxing her brain into a state of profound, meditative twilight. Lying there in the dark, wrapped in the rich lineage of her family quilts and serenaded by the spring rain, the mother experiences a total release of purpose. She has travelled to the city, she has held the future in her arms, she has planted her garden, and she has read the archives of her love. There are no more tasks left to fulfill, no more worries to untangle, and no more distances to bridge. Her children are safe in the new century, and she is perfectly secure in her timeless refuge. The boundaries of her mind begin to soften, her thoughts drifting like autumn leaves on a slow-moving stream, dissolving into the beautiful velvet darkness of the rural night. As the rain continues its steady, healing lullaby outside, she surrenders completely to the heavy, irresistible pull of sleep, sinking down into a dreamless, beautiful and eternal rest. The morning arrives with a crystalline, luminous clarity that only follows a night of steady, restorative spring rain. As the first light of dawn begins to crest over the eastern hills, it finds the world outside the farmhouse transformed into a shimmering, vibrant masterpiece. Every leaf on the ancient apple trees in the orchard, every blade of grass in the meadow, and every weathered stone in the garden wall is adorned with tiny, brilliant droplets of water that catch the early sunlight and refract it into miniature dancing rainbows. The mother wakes slowly, emerging from the depths of her long, undisturbed slumber with the gentle, rhythmic grace of a forest creature. There is no urgency in her rising. The day stretches out before her, a vast and unwritten expanse of peaceful possibility, and she savours the lingering warmth of her bed before finally sitting up. She walks to the window and pushes the sash upward, letting the cool, revitalized air of the morning flood into her room. The smell is intoxicating, a mixture of wet pine needles, the sweet, earthy aroma of saturated soil, and the clean, sharp scent of new life awakening in the meadows. Below in the garden, the robin sings a clear, jubilant melody from the top of the fence post, its voice cutting through the soft, ambient stillness of the valley. For a long, beautiful moment, the mother stands at the window, watching the mist slowly retreat from the lower pastures, revealing the lush emerald green of the spring grass. She feels a profound connection to this landscape, a sense of belonging that is as deep and unshakable as the roots of the oak trees surrounding her home. She is not merely living in this house, she is part of its foundation, a vital, breathing element of its long, continuous history. Moving through her morning routine, she finds an exquisite beauty in the simplest of tasks. In the kitchen, she kindles the stove fire, watching the orange flames leap to life with a cheerful, crackling vigor that mirrors the rejuvenation of the world outside. She grinds fresh coffee beans, the aroma mingling with the crisp morning air, and pours a cup of hot, dark brew. With the ceramic mug in her hands, she sits on the back porch, watching the sun climb higher, turning the dew-kissed garden into a glowing, ethereal landscape. The silence is profound, yet it is not empty. It is filled with the subtle, intricate sounds of nature, the distant, rhythmic lowing of a neighbour's cattle, the soft rustle of wind in the high branches, and the gentle, persistent drip of water falling from the eaves of the roof. She thinks of her daughter and the new baby in the city, and she feels a sweet, expansive love that reaches across the miles with a weightless, silent energy. There is no longer a shadow of concern in her heart regarding the distance that separates them. She understands now that the act of mothering is not confined to the physical presence of a child. It is a permanent, ethereal state of being, a constant anchoring that continues regardless of where the child journeys or how many years pass. She has done her work well. She has built a home that is strong enough to serve as a beacon, a place of peace and absolute stability, and she is now free to inhabit that peace fully and completely. As the morning light deepens to a bright golden yellow, she sets her mug down and steps out into the garden. Her boots sink slightly into the soft, damp earth, a sensation of groundedness that feels deeply satisfying. She wanders between the rows of her flower beds, where the tulips are beginning to unfurl their vibrant, saturated petals, and she finds herself humming a soft, wordless tune, the same melody she hummed to her own children when they were small. The air is so pure, so filled with the promise of growth and the quiet endurance of life, that it feels as though the very atmosphere is holding her in a gentle, protective embrace. She is exactly where she is meant to be, a woman of the earth, surrounded by the living legacy of her own love, completely at rest in the radiant, unfolding beauty of a brand new day. The golden afternoon light has begun to slant across the valley, signalling the approach of the day's final, most meditative hours. The mother sits on the wooden bench of her back porch, a place that has served as her primary observatory for decades. In the year 1900, the rhythm of a day is dictated not by the relentless ticking of urban clocks, but by the slow, inevitable movement of the sun across the sky and the gradual lengthening of shadows across the fields. She has brought her journal out with her, along with a small embroidered pouch of dried lavender, and she finds herself simply watching the landscape rather than writing, as if the very act of observation is a form of prayer. The meadow before her is a sea of tall, swaying grasses, shifting in the gentle westerly breeze like the surface of a golden lake. Beyond the meadow, the ancient oaks stand as silent sentinels, their deep green canopies providing a cool, dark contrast to the bright, honey-coloured light that bathes the lower valley. Every element of this scene, the distant hum of insects, the slow migration of a lone hawk circling high above, the soft creaking of the farmhouse shingles, feels perfectly harmonized for the mother. These are not just sensory experiences, they are the fundamental components of her peace. She has spent a lifetime learning that to find true rest, one must stop fighting the currents of change and start aligning with the natural cyclical patterns of life itself. She opens her journal to the final blank page. The paper is thick, creamy, and holds the faint, lingering scent of the cedarwood box where it is kept. She dips her pen, but she does not immediately write. Instead, she allows her gaze to drift across the horizon, acknowledging the profound shift in her own perspective over these last few months. When she first faced the silence of her home, she had mistaken it for a loss of purpose, an empty room that echoed with the memories of voices that no longer resided there. Now she realizes that the silence was never a void, it was a canvas, a wide, open space of total freedom, where she could finally hear the quiet, consistent voice of her own spirit. She had been so busy nurturing others for so long that she had forgotten how to nurture her own sense of self, but the journey to the city and the subsequent return had served as a necessary catalyst for this ultimate reclamation. As the sun dips lower, casting an incandescent, rose-coloured glow over the landscape, she begins to write, her movements slow and deliberate. She records no grand events or dramatic changes. Instead, she writes of the subtle shifts in the light, the taste of the morning coffee, the way the apple trees seem to sigh when the wind passes through them, and the overwhelming quiet joy of simply being exactly where she is. She writes about the legacy she has left behind in her children and the new life beginning in the city, but she also writes about the legacy she is building for herself in this very moment, the legacy of absolute, unshakable contentment. She realizes that her life, far from being a chapter that is closing, is actually a book that has finally found its quiet, sturdy binding. The evening air begins to cool, bringing with it the crisp, refreshing scent of the approaching night. The mother sets her pen aside and closes the journal, laying her hands flat against the cover. There is a deep, resonant weight in her heart, a feeling of total completion. She has fulfilled every responsibility that was ever placed upon her, and she has done so with grace, love, and unwavering commitment. Now, in the twilight of the year 1900, she finds herself entering a new era of her own, an era of personal autonomy, reflection, and deep spiritual harvest. The silence that surrounds her is no longer something to be endured. It is a companion, a vast and benevolent presence that cradles her in its arms. As the first stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, she remains on the porch, not moving, not thinking, simply breathing in the immense quiet beauty of her existence. She is a thread in the grand, intricate tapestry of time, and for the first time in her life she feels entirely content with the position she occupies. The house behind her stands firm and solid, a beacon of her history, and the night before her holds nothing but the promise of profound, restorative rest. The day is ending, the work is done, and the peace that descends upon her is complete, absolute, and profoundly, beautifully eternal. The dawn of the new day arrives not with a sound, but with a gradual, breathtaking infusion of colour that transforms the farmhouse from a silhouette into a living, breathing part of the landscape. The mother has been awake for some time, resting in the stillness of her bed, watching the darkness in the corners of the room slowly retreat as the sky outside shifts from deep, ink-washed charcoal to a soft, luminous pearl grey. There is a profound, sacred quality to these early morning minutes, a time when the world of 1900 feels as though it is waiting, holding its collective breath before the first stirrings of the day's activities begin. She feels an immense quiet gratitude for this stillness, a sense of deep appreciation for the luxury of having nowhere else to be and nothing left to prove. As she steps out onto the back porch, the air is sharp and invigorating, carrying the crisp, wet scent of the pre-dawn grass and the faint, earthy fragrance of the woods. The world is draped in a heavy, glistening coat of dew that makes every surface reflect the soft, pale light of the rising sun. She walks down the steps, her feet sinking into the cool, damp earth, and makes her way toward the orchard. There is a rhythm to her movement now, a slow, deliberate, and graceful cadence that reflects the internal state of her spirit. She is no longer walking to get somewhere, she is simply moving in harmony with the rotation of the earth, a participant in the silent grand procession of a spring morning. She pauses beneath the heavy, spreading branches of the oldest apple tree, its bark gnarled and silvered by decades of storms and seasons. Looking up into the canopy where the buds are beginning to swell with the promise of future blossoms, she experiences a moment of absolute, crystalline clarity. She understands with a depth that transcends words that the stillness she has cultivated in her home is not an endpoint, it is a source. It is the deep, quiet well from which all of her strength, her love, and her resilience have been drawn throughout her life. The noise of the city, the demands of her children's new lives, the rapid advancements of this changing century, none of these can touch the profound, unshakable centre of her being, because she has finally learned that the home she truly inhabits is not made of wood or stone, but of the peace she carries within her own soul. She reaches out to touch the trunk of the tree, her fingers tracing the rough, textured surface, feeling the slow, hidden energy of the sap rising from the roots to the branches. It is a silent, persistent life force, one that does not rush, yet never fails to fulfill its purpose. She sees her own life reflected in this tree, the decades of growth, the periods of dormancy, the strength gained through weathering the elements, and the quiet, enduring beauty of simply standing in one place and existing. A soft, gentle wind stirs the leaves, creating a whispering sound that feels like a conversation between the earth and the sky. She closes her eyes, letting the sound wash over her, and feels the tension of the past months dissolve entirely, replaced by a radiant, light-filled sense of presence. The sun finally crests the horizon, spilling a brilliant golden light across the entire valley, turning the dew-covered fields into a glittering, radiant plain. The light is so intense and so pure that it seems to dissolve the very boundaries of the physical world, leaving only the sensation of warmth and the awareness of life's continuity. She is not a woman apart from the world, she is an integral, quiet part of it, as essential as the soil, the trees, and the morning light itself. There is no loneliness here, for she is surrounded by the presence of all that she has loved and all that she has nurtured. The silence is not a void, but a symphony of natural rhythms, the chirping of a waking bird, the soft murmur of the breeze, the distant rhythmic ticking of her own heartbeat. She stands in the golden light, her face uplifted, her heart entirely still, basking in the profound, beautiful grace of a life that has come full circle and is now resting in the perfect, quiet centre of its own existence. The midday sun now hangs directly above the valley, casting a bright white-gold radiance that turns the world into a study of stillness. In the parlour of the farmhouse, the atmosphere has deepened into a tranquil, heavy peace. The mother has retreated from the garden into the cool, shadowed interior of the house, where the air smells of beeswax, dried lavender, and the faint, sweet trace of old books. She sits on her high-backed armchair, the one positioned perfectly to catch the slanting, dust-mote-filled light that filters through the lace curtains. It is a time of day when the rest of the world seems to pause, allowing the earth to rest in the warmth of the sun, and she finds herself sinking into that same universal rhythm. As she watches the light patterns shift slowly across the polished floorboards, she realizes that she is observing the physical manifestation of time itself. These rays of light have travelled millions of miles across the vast, dark reaches of space to arrive here, in her quiet parlour, at this exact fleeting moment in the year 1900. Everything is in constant, silent motion, the earth turning, the seasons shifting, the generations passing, and yet, from where she sits, everything is perfectly, beautifully still. She feels a profound sense of surrender, a complete release of the need to manage, to oversee, or to influence the trajectory of her children's lives. They are out in the world, weaving their own stories into the fabric of the new century, and the realization of their independence fills her not with a sense of loss, but with a quiet, triumphant pride. She picks up a piece of white linen, her needle moving with a slow, hypnotic grace. There is no urgency in her embroidery, No race to finish the pattern. Each stitch is a deliberate act of mindfulness, a way to anchor her spirit in the tangible physical reality of the present. As the silver needle passes through the fabric, in, then out, she synchronizes her breathing with the movement, feeling her heartbeat settle into a calm, steady pulse. The room is so quiet that she can hear the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a sound that she no longer perceives as a countdown to anything. Instead, it is the heartbeat of the house, a constant, reassuring reminder that life continues in its own orderly fashion, regardless of the chaos that may exist beyond these walls. The windows are open, and from the orchard outside comes the occasional soft rustle of leaves as a gentle breeze passes through. Occasionally, a bee drifts into the room, its low, droning hum creating a soothing, meditative vibration that seems to thicken the air with peace. She allows her eyelids to grow heavy, though she does not fully sleep. She simply lets her consciousness drift in the warm, golden currents of the afternoon. She thinks of the grandmother she once was, the mother she had to be, and the woman she is now, a composite of all those roles, finally distilled into a singular, pure essence. There is no conflict between these versions of herself. They are all present, all honoured, and all resting together in the soft light of this afternoon. This, she realises, is the ultimate gift of a long life, the ability to sit in the centre of the storm and find not wind, but absolute perfect silence. The modern world outside is hurtling toward the future, full of electric lights, faster trains, and a rapid acceleration of daily life, but here, in the heart of her home, she has created a sanctuary that is immune to such pressures. She is a woman who has given everything, her energy, her time, her love, her youth, and in return she has been granted this state of grace, where she can sit and watch the light move across the room and know, with total certainty, that all is well. As the afternoon wanes and the shadows begin to lengthen, she continues her slow, rhythmic stitching, her mind as quiet as the dust motes dancing in the sun, fully immersed in the beautiful, unhurried flow of the universe. The twilight hour in the valley is a time of profound alchemy, where the golden clarity of day undergoes a slow, velvet transformation into the mysteries of night. The mother stands by the parlour window, her hands resting on the cool mahogany sill, watching the world outside lose its sharp edges. The vibrant greens of the orchard and the bright ochre of the meadow soil are gradually being washed over with layers of deep indigo and soft bruised purple. It is the hour when the farmhouse begins to settle, the wooden beams emitting soft, settling groans as they cool, and the shadows in the corners of the room stretch out like long, familiar fingers, claiming the space for the coming night. In the distance, across the rolling landscape, the first tiny flickering points of light appear, the kerosene lanterns being lit in the windows of neighbouring farms. Each little spark is a beacon of human existence, a testament to the lives being lived in the quiet, hidden corners of the valley. Seeing them, the mother feels a surge of profound, warm kinship. She is not a solitary figure in a dying world. She is part of a vast, breathing constellation of families who have chosen the rhythms of the earth over the relentless pace of the growing cities. Her heart, once prone to a restless, aching kind of nostalgia, now beats with a steady, tranquil rhythm that mirrors the calm of the landscape. She understands now that the act of lighting a lamp is a small, sacred defiance against the darkness, a promise that warmth and life will always find a way to persist. Her mind drifts back to the city, to the house where her daughter now holds the future in her arms. She imagines her daughter perhaps at this very moment lighting a lamp in a tall, narrow building, the glow of the flame illuminating the face of her grandchild. The mother does not feel the ache of distance. Instead, she feels a powerful, invisible cord that stretches through the miles, connecting her own quiet, rural sanctuary to the bustling, energetic urban home. It is a lineage of love, a thread that remains unbroken across the changing landscapes of time. She realizes that her life's work is not something that finished when her children left. It is a seed that has sprouted, a cycle that has successfully turned. The love she gave was not a resource to be depleted, but an energy that has expanded, taking new forms and finding new places to bloom. The wind begins to pick up, bringing with it the cool, damp perfume of the evening forest, and she watches as the silhouette of the old oak tree dances against the deep, star-dusted velvet of the sky. The beauty of the night is almost overwhelming in its purity. She finds herself breathing in sync with the world, her inhalations and exhalations matching the slow, gentle swaying of the trees and the quiet, steady progress of the shadows. There is no urgency in her spirit, no unfinished business to haunt the edges of her thoughts. She has arrived at a place of total integration, where the past with all its joys and trials, and the future with all its unknowns, meet in the perfect silent equilibrium of the present. As the last remnants of daylight fade entirely, she moves away from the window and begins the simple rhythmic ritual of preparing her home for the night. She walks from room to room, touching the brass latches, smoothing the fabric of the sofa, and ensuring the house is closed, secure, and ready for its own rest. Each action is a gesture of love toward the structure that has held her, protected her, and witnessed the entirety of her journey. The house is not merely wood and stone, it is a repository of her essence, a physical manifestation of her own enduring spirit. When she finally stands in the center of the hallway, bathed in the soft, ambient dark, she feels entirely, profoundly at home. The world is vast, the century is new, and the future is an endless, unfolding mystery. But for tonight she is perfectly anchored in the quiet, beautiful sanctuary of her own creation. The house has now fully transitioned into the domain of the night, existing as a silent, anchored vessel in the vast, star-filled ocean of the rural landscape. In the parlour, the mother sits in the deep velvet darkness, having chosen not to light the kerosene lamp. She has discovered that in the absence of artificial light, her other senses awaken with a heightened, gentle clarity. She can hear the soft rhythmic contraction of the floorboards as the house cools down from the heat of the day. She can perceive the faint, woodsy scent of the ancient oak beams that have supported the roof for over a century. She can feel the subtle, cool draught that whispers through the slightly parted curtains, carrying the breath of the nighttime meadows. In this profound darkness, the boundaries of her own body feel permeable, as if she is breathing in unison with the very walls of the house. She is in a state of absolute weightless surrender. The years of labour, the long miles travelled on iron-wheeled trains, the anxieties of maternal care, and the weight of decades of responsibilities have all dissolved, replaced by a crystalline awareness of being. It is a form of existence that is rare in the bustling world of 1900, a world that is constantly racing, inventing, and expanding. But here, in the heart of this dark, quiet parlour, she has found the secret rhythm of the universe, the rhythm of the pause. She realizes that life is not just the action of the day, the planting of the seed or the harvesting of the crop. It is equally the silent, dark, essential time of rest that allows the earth to replenish itself. She is that rest. She is that essential stillness. In the silence, she thinks of her children again, but not as distant figures in a different city. They feel closer than ever present, in the very marrow of her bones, carried in the memories that reside in every piece of furniture, every corner of this house. She is the root, and they are the branches, but they are all the same tree, drinking from the same deep, invisible water. The love she feels for them has matured into a pure, radiant energy that requires no verbal expression, no letters, no physical proximity. It is a constant ambient presence, like the light of the stars that remains even when we cannot see them. This realization brings a smile to her face in the dark, a smile of profound, gentle recognition that her life's work has been a success, not because of what she has achieved, but because of the depth of the love she has managed to sustain. Outside, the world of the new century continues its slow, nocturnal progress. The owl calls from the woods, the wind brushes against the dormant garden, and the constellations wheel silently across the zenith of the sky. None of this touches her, yet she is intimately connected to all of it. She is an observer of the infinite, a witness to the beauty of the transition. The house around her feels vast, an endless, secure space where she can sit for eternity. There is no urgency to go to bed, no pressure to sleep, no fear of the morning. She is simply existing, a consciousness at peace with its own history, comfortable in the velvet embrace of the dark. As she sits, she feels a slow rhythmic expansion in her chest, a steady calm tide of peace that flows outward to fill the room, the farmhouse, the orchard, and the entire sleeping valley. She is the calm centre of her own world. The tensions of the human experience have been smoothed away, leaving only the essential, beautiful core of her spirit. She knows with a final, serene certainty that she has arrived at the destination she has been travelling toward all her life. She has reached the point of total harmony, where the internal and the external worlds are perfectly aligned. She is home, she is whole, and she is profoundly, eternally at rest. The night is a cradle, and she is finally completely ready to be held by it. The morning that follows is not like any other morning she has ever known. It arrives with a light so pristine, so golden and pervasive, that it feels as if the world has been washed clean of all history and sorrow. When the mother opens her eyes, there is no lingering fatigue, no echo of the heavy dreams that once clouded her thoughts. Instead, there is a profound crystalline clarity, a feeling of being completely unburdened. She rises from the bed with a lightness that surprises her, her movements fluid and free, as if the very air in the room has become a buoyancy that supports her. She walks to the window, and for the first time she does not just see the garden or the orchard, she sees the interconnected, pulsing life of the entire valley as a singular, beautiful organism. Outside, the mist is retreating, revealing a landscape that glows with the freshness of a world just born. The dew on the apple blossoms sparkles like diamonds scattered across the green velvet of the spring trees, and the birdsong is a cascading, intricate symphony that sounds more like laughter than mere music. She steps out onto the porch, and the cool air greets her like a long-lost friend. She draws it deep into her lungs, feeling every cell of her body vibrate with a renewed sense of purpose, a purpose that is no longer tied to duty or sacrifice, but to the simple holy act of presence. She realizes that the peace she has been seeking was never a destination at the end of a journey. It was the ground beneath her feet, the sky above her head, and the rhythm of her own beating heart all along. She walks down into the garden, her bare feet pressing into the damp, fragrant soil. There is an intimacy in this contact that feels like a conversation with the earth itself. She stops by the patch of wild violets, their deep purple petals cupping the morning dew, and she finds herself laughing, a soft musical sound that catches the wind. It is the laughter of someone who has finally stepped out from behind a heavy curtain, someone who has realized that the stage of life is infinite and that the performance is hers to shape, not as a burden but as a joy. She looks toward the distant hills, imagining the path that leads toward the city where her children reside, and the love she feels for them now is expansive and bright. It is no longer an aching, protective worry. It is a radiant, supportive energy that she sends out into the world like sunlight, knowing they are safe, knowing they are growing, and knowing that the threads between them are made of light and are never ever frayed. In the kitchen, the ritual of the morning coffee becomes a meditation on beauty. As the water boils and the aroma fills the room, she finds herself marveling at the simple, miraculous precision of life, the fire, the water, the bean, the steam. Everything is a miracle when viewed through the eyes of a heart that is no longer rushing. She sits at the kitchen table, the sun pouring through the glass, and she doesn't feel the need to fill the silence with thoughts or plans. She is perfectly content to just exist, to be a witness to the unfolding of the day. The house itself seems to purr with contentment, the wooden beams settling into a happy, quiet stability. The house finally knowing that its keeper is at peace, and therefore it too can rest in its own strength. The hours of the morning stretch out before her, vast and golden, and she decides that today she will do nothing but observe the way the light changes the colour of the oak leaves and listen to the wind as it travels from the forest to the meadows. She has become a student of the present moment. She realizes that the new century is moving forward, bringing its machines and its speed, but she is the keeper of a different, more ancient kind of progress, the progress of the soul toward its own center. As she stands in the middle of her garden, with the sun warming her shoulders and the scent of spring flowers rising to meet her, she knows that this is not an ending, it is a beginning. It is the first day of a life lived in absolute unfiltered harmony with the world. She is here, she is vibrant, and she is profoundly, beautifully alive. The afternoon sun, now a deep, burnished gold, casts long and playful shadows across the rolling landscape as the mother sets out for a walk beyond the boundaries of her own garden. For years, her world was defined by the fences of the property, the walls of the kitchen, and the perimeter of the orchard, not because she was confined, but because those were the spaces that required her protection. But today, with a spirit that feels as light as a dandelion seed caught in a summer breeze, she crosses the stile and wanders into the open meadow. Her movements are unburdened, her pace steady and rhythmic, echoing the confident stride of a woman who has finally claimed her own freedom. The meadow is alive with the hum of hidden life. Grasshoppers click and whir in the tall, swaying timothy grass, and a gentle breeze carries the sweet, heady scent of wild clover and sun-warmed earth. As she walks, the horizon seems to expand, revealing a vista of rolling hills that she had only ever glimpsed from the upstairs window. The scale of the world feels different now. It is no longer something to be managed, but something to be experienced. Every tree she passes, every erratic flight of a butterfly, every play of shadow and light on the hillsides, feels like a personal greeting from a landscape that has known her for a lifetime. There is a profound sense of recognition. She is not just a visitor in these fields, she is a part of their story. She reaches the crest of the hill, where an old weathered stone wall marks the boundary of the original family farm. Sitting down on a sun-warmed slab of grey rock, she looks back toward her house. From this vantage point, it appears small and nestled, a protective cocoon against the vast, sweeping beauty of the valley. She thinks of the generations who have walked these same paths, the laughter and the tears that have soaked into this soil, and she feels a sudden sharp clarity. She is the bridge. She is the living connection between the past that built this foundation and the future that her children are currently shaping in the distant smoky city. The weight of that realization, which might have once felt like a burden, now feels like a profound honor. She is the keeper of the memory, the gentle anchor that allows the family tree to grow in any direction it chooses. As the sun begins its final descent, painting the clouds in shades of apricot, violet, and soft rose, she does not feel the usual pull to return for evening chores. For the first time she allows the day to unfold without a schedule. She watches the light shift, observing the way the purple shadows creep up the eastern slopes, and she realizes that time is not a master to be obeyed, but a companion to be savoured. She reflects on her daughter's life, the bustling apartment, the noise of the streetcars, the ambition and the striving, and she sends a quiet, intentional thought of peace toward her. She imagines that peace as a soft, cooling rain falling over the city, touching the brow of her daughter, calming the baby in her cradle. She knows that even from this distance her love acts as a sanctuary, a quiet place of refuge that her children can return to whenever their own lives become too loud. The twilight deepens, and the first star, bright, steady, and solitary, shines in the pale blue dome of the sky. The evening chorus of crickets begins to rise, a rhythmic, hypnotic sound that seems to pulse with the very heartbeat of the earth. The mother remains on the hill for a long meditative interval, her mind entirely clear of plans or worries. She is simply a woman sitting under the vast opening sky, feeling the cooling air on her skin, breathing in the scent of the night-blooming flowers. She has achieved something rare and beautiful. She has found a stillness so deep that the world could change 1,000 times over, and she would remain anchored in her own grace. The stars begin to multiply, piercing the velvet curtain of the night, and she stands up, turning slowly toward the distant, welcoming glow of the lamp she knows she will light when she returns. She is no longer just a mother. She is a woman who has found her way home, not just to a house, but to herself. Returning to the house under the vast starlit canopy of the night, the mother feels a new, quiet determination taking root within her. The air inside the farmhouse is still holding the warmth of the day, a welcoming, familiar presence that feels almost like a physical embrace. She walks through the rooms, not with the aim of closing them off for the night, but with the intention of opening herself to a new act of creation. She sits at the small oak desk in the parlour, the place where she once read the letters of her children, and she decides to write. It is not a letter to the city, nor a note to a neighbour, but a letter to the woman she will become in the years that follow, a message of grace, a reminder of this hard-won stillness. She finds a fresh sheet of heavy, cream-coloured parchment and dips her pen into the inkwell. The scratch of the nib against the paper is the only sound in the house, a crisp, rhythmic cadence that feels like the ticking of a different kind of clock, one that measures not seconds but the expansion of a soul. As she begins to write, the words flow with an ease that surprises her. She writes about the morning light on the orchard, the way the wind speaks to the ancient oak trees, and the profound, transformative realization that peace is not an absence of movement, but an alignment with the natural current of existence. She writes down the lessons she has learned through decades of devotion, that love is strongest when it is free, that home is a state of being rather than a location, and that the silence is the most honest language the world speaks. Each stroke of the pen is deliberate, a physical manifestation of her own internal equilibrium. She finds herself smiling as she traces the elegant loops of the script, imagining her own eyes reading these lines years from now, when the century will be older and the world perhaps even faster than it is today. She is leaving a map of her own heart for her future self, a compass that will always point back to this moment of total, unadulterated clarity. She writes of the beauty of the field cricket's song, the scent of the evening dew, and the quiet joy of being a woman who is finally, truly her own keeper. The act of writing is cathartic. It is a way of anchoring these ephemeral feelings into something permanent, something that can be touched and revisited. The lamp burns with a steady amber flame, casting long soft shadows that seem to dance in time with the movement of her hand. She loses track of time entirely. Whether it is an hour or a moment, it does not matter. The house is a sanctuary, a vessel carrying her through the deep protective waters of the night. She does not feel the ache of old age in her joints or the weariness of the day's journey. She feels only the vibrant, pulsating energy of a spirit that has finally been given permission to expand. When she finishes the letter, she pauses, letting the ink dry beneath the warm glow of the lamp. The silence that follows is thick and sweet, like honey poured into the cracks of the room, filling the space with a sense of completion. She carefully folds the parchment, not sealing it with wax, but tucking it into the back of her cedarwood box among the other treasures of her life. She stands up and walks to the window, looking out into the darkness once more. The world is vast and indifferent, filled with the promise of change and the inevitability of time, but she feels no fear. She has done the work of a lifetime. She has cultivated the garden of her own inner life, and the harvest is a peace that surpasses all understanding. She knows that tomorrow will come with its own light, its own tasks, and its own rhythms, and she is ready to meet them, not as a woman who must perform, but as a woman who simply is. She blows out the lamp, and for a long moment she stands in the total beautiful darkness, feeling the house breathe around her, perfectly at ease, perfectly whole, and perfectly, finally at home. The morning air that filters through the bedroom window at dawn feels lighter, as if it carries the scent of possibilities that did not exist until this moment. When the mother wakes, she does not reach for the day with a list of tasks or the weight of expectation. She wakes with an expansive, quiet joy that resides in her chest. Like a calm, golden flame, the letter she wrote the night before feels like a cornerstone she has laid in the foundation of her own being, a testament that she has finally taken ownership of her inner life. She sits on the edge of the bed for a long, unhurried interval, watching the light change from a pale, watery violet to a soft, peach-hued glow, and she feels the house settling around her as if it, too, is relieved of its burdens. She moves through the morning rituals with a grace that is almost ceremonial. In the kitchen, the simple clatter of the tea kettle and the rhythmic sweeping of the floor are not chores, but melodies of domestic harmony. She finds herself pausing often, not because she is tired, but because she is captured by the way a single shaft of sunlight illuminates the dust motes dancing in the air, or the way the steam rises from her cup in a delicate, swirling dance. She is no longer just moving through her home, she is dancing with it. Each corner, each shelf, each worn floorboard has a history that now feels like a conversation she is part of, a gentle dialogue between her spirit and the space she has occupied for so many years. Stepping out into the garden, she finds that the world has responded to her own inner shift. The flowers seem to stand a little taller, their colours more vibrant in the crisp morning air. The bees, moving from bloom to bloom, hum a deeper, more resonant note. She walks to the edge of the property, where the wild meadow begins, and she sits on her favourite bench, the one beneath the old maple tree. She does not bring a book or a basket of needlework, she brings only her presence. For the first time she truly listens, not just to the sounds she expects to hear, but to the silence underneath them. It is in this silence that she hears the deeper pulse of the season, the slow upward surge of spring, the hidden energy of life pushing through the earth, the vast slow-motion breathing of the valley. She realizes that her children, wherever they are moving in this same current, even if they are currently distracted by the cacophony of their own lives. She envisions them not as people she needs to worry for, but as adventurers traversing their own landscapes, and she feels a sudden profound pride in them. They are not her extensions, they are their own unfolding mysteries. And she in turn is not a memory of who she was, but a vibrant, living consciousness in the here and now. The shift is subtle but absolute. She has stopped waiting for the future to arrive, and has stopped dwelling on the past to make sense of her worth. She is simply here, a woman standing in the golden light, a part of the vast, beautiful and eternal unfolding of the world. As the sun climbs higher, warming her skin and brightening the fields, she feels a sense of deep, internal alignment. There is no longer any friction between her soul and her circumstances. The chores, the seasons, the inevitable changes of 1900, all of it is just the weather of life, and she has finally learned to be the sky that holds it all. She stands up, feeling the strength in her legs and the clarity in her mind, and she decides to spend the rest of the day in a state of intentional observation. She will walk the borders, she will tend the soil, she will breathe the air, and she will celebrate the sheer, improbable miracle of being alive. The house waits for her, the garden beckons, and the day stretches out before her, empty of pressure and full of light, a blank page upon which she is finally, joyfully writing her own name. The afternoon brings an unexpected visitor to the farmhouse gate, a young man from the neighbouring farm, arriving on a bicycle, his face flushed from the dusty trek across the valley road. He has come to return a book that had been lent to his father months ago, but as he stops his machine and catches his breath, he finds himself hesitating at the edge of the garden. The mother, who is busy pruning the rose bushes near the fence, looks up. She does not see a disruption to her quiet day. She sees a soul that is currently carrying the exact kind of restless, hurried energy she herself has finally released. She wipes her garden gloves on her apron, stands and walks toward him with a smile that is as open and clear as the sky above. "It is a warm day for a ride," she says, her voice steady and warm, lacking any of the customary urgency that usually colours such roadside conversations. The young man leans against the fence, his breathing still rapid, his eyes darting toward the horizon, as if he is already thinking about the next task, the next mile, the next deadline. He apologizes for the delay in returning the book, his speech tumbling out in a rush, a verbal reflection of the inner tension he is clearly holding. The mother listens, truly listens, letting his words land in the silence she has cultivated around her. She does not feel the need to fill the pauses or steer the conversation. She simply stays present, an anchor of calm in his sea of restlessness. As she takes the book, she offers him a glass of cool water from the porch, and they sit for a moment on the bench under the maple tree. The silence between them is not awkward. It is thick with the ambient sounds of the afternoon, the rustle of leaves, the distant caw of a crow, the steady, rhythmic life of the valley. The young man, perhaps sensing the unusual stillness of the woman beside him, finds his own shoulders dropping, the tight set of his jaw easing. He begins to talk not of his errands or his duties, but of the way the light hit the hills as he rode over, and how for a brief second he had forgotten where he was going. He speaks with a softness he hadn't intended to use, his gaze lingering on the garden in a way that suggests he is seeing it for the first time. The mother shares a small, simple observation about the season, how the earth is turning, how the trees are preparing for the next stage of their cycle, and her words carry the weight of someone who is deeply connected to the ground she stands on. She speaks with the quiet authority of one who has stopped fighting the river and has started swimming with it. The young man stares at her, then out at the fields, and there is a look of dawning recognition in his eyes. He is glimpsing a way of being that he did not know existed, a life that is not measured by the frantic pace of the new century, but by the depth of one's presence within it. He does not know how to name what he feels, but he knows that he is suddenly, strangely, not in a hurry to leave. When he finally rises to go, his movements are deliberate, less frantic than when he arrived. He thanks her, not just for the water or the book, but for the pause, though he expresses it in the simple language of youth. As he pedals away, the mother watches him go, noting the steadier, more rhythmic cadence of his pedaling. She has not changed him, but she has offered him a mirror of what is possible when one simply stops. It is a small ripple in the vast, still pond of her day, a brief intersection of two lives moving at different speeds, and it leaves her feeling more connected to the world than before. Sleepy History with Benedict is created for relaxation, entertainment, and sleep purposes. The stories shared on this channel are inspired by historical events, daily life, and real periods in history, but they may be simplified, adapted, or narrated in a calming way to enhance the listening experience. This content is not intended to be a precise academic or educational source. While we aim to stay generally accurate, some details may be altered for storytelling flow and relaxation. Please do not rely on this channel as a primary source for historical research or study. By listening, you acknowledge that this content is designed to help you unwind, relax, and fall asleep. Thank you for your understanding and support.